The year is 1095. A single man stands before a crowd in the cold November air of Clermont, France. He raises his hand. His words will set a continent on fire and send 100,000 souls marching toward Jerusalem. But this isn't the story of what happened next. This is the story of how the world reached the breaking point, or such madness became inevitable. Europe is dying. Not metaphorically, literally dying. For decades, famine has stalked the land like a specter. Crops fail, children starve in the streets, villages empty as families abandon homes that can no longer feed them. The winter of 1094 brings cold so severe that chroniclers will write of rivers freezing solid and livestock perishing in their pens. In this world of scarcity, violence becomes survival. Knights with no land to inherit turn to banditry. Minor nobles wage private wars over scraps of territory. The roads between towns become hunting grounds where armed men prey on travelers. The church calls it the Peace of God movement, attempting to restrict when and where fighting can occur. It fails. The violence is too widespread, too desperate, too deeply woven into the fabric of a society tearing itself apart. And at the center of this chaos, the institution that once held Christendom together is fracturing. The papacy, for generations the moral authority of Western Europe, has become a prize fought over by Italian noble families and German emperors. Popes are made and unmade by secular powers. Some serve only months before being deposed or murdered. The office that claims to speak for God on earth has become a political football. But in 1088, something changes. A man named Urban is elected pope, Urban II. He is not a warrior, he is not a king, but he understands power, and he understands that the papacy is losing it. Urban faces a particular enemy. Henry IV, the Holy Roman Emperor, controls much of Italy and has installed his own anti-pope in Rome. Urban is forced to operate from exile, moving between sympathetic cities, unable to even enter the Eternal City without armed resistance. The emperor's forces occupy the Vatican. Urban's authority is challenged at every turn. He needs something bold. Something that will unite the fractured kingdoms of Europe under papal leadership and prove that the Pope, not the Emperor, commands the loyalty of Christian souls. Then, in the spring of 1095, an opportunity arrives from the east. A delegation from the Byzantine Empire appears at Urban's court. They carry a message from Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, and that message is a cry for help. The Byzantine Empire, that ancient continuation of Rome itself, is collapsing. For centuries, Constantinople stood as the unconquerable bulwark between Christian Europe and the Islamic world. But in 1071, at the Battle of Manzikert, the Seljuk Turks shattered a Byzantine army and captured the emperor. The heartland of Asia Minor, the empire's breadbasket and recruiting ground, fell to Turkish control. Cities that had been Christian for 1,000 years now heard the call to prayer from minarets. Refugees flooded Constantinople with tales of churches converted to mosques and pilgrims murdered on the roads to Jerusalem. Alexios clawed his way to the throne in 81 and has spent 14 years desperately trying to stop the bleeding. He has stabilized the borders, he has rebuilt the army, but he cannot retake what was lost. Not alone. So Alexios makes a calculated request. He asks Pope Urban for soldiers, mercenaries, a few thousand Western knights to serve as shock troops in a Byzantine campaign to reclaim Asia Minor. He offers payment. He offers command positions. He frames it as Christian brothers helping Christian brothers. It is a reasonable request, a limited military commitment, professional soldiers doing what they do best in exchange for Byzantine gold. Urban listens to the Byzantine ambassadors. He nods. He thanks them. And then he begins planning something far, far larger. Urban spends the summer of 1095 traveling through France. He meets with bishops. He speaks to nobles. He lays groundwork. And in November, he calls a church council at Clermont. Hundreds of clergy attend. The official business is church reform, discussions of doctrine and discipline. But everyone knows something else is coming. Urban has been building toward this moment. On November 27th, after the council's business is concluded, Urban steps outside. A field east of the cathedral has been prepared, a platform erected, and thousands have gathered, not just clergy, knights, peasants, townspeople. Word has spread that the Pope himself will speak. Urban begins. He speaks of the sufferings of Eastern Christians. He describes in vivid, brutal detail the atrocities committed against pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. He tells of churches desecrated, of holy sites defiled, of Christian blood spilled on sacred ground. He paints a picture of Jerusalem, the very city where Christ walked and died, now under the boot of Muslim conquerors. Every word is calculated, every image designed to ignite rage and grief in equal measure. But Urban is not asking for a military expedition. Not exactly. He is offering redemption.
Europe, he says, is drowning in sin. The violence, the bloodshed, the endless petty wars between Christian brothers, all of it is an offense to God. But there is a way to atone. Take up the cross, march to Jerusalem, free the Holy Land from those who would deny Christians access to their most sacred places. Fight not for land or wealth, but for salvation itself. And here is the promise that changes everything. Any man who dies on this journey, Urban declares, will have all his sins forgiven, complete absolution, a guaranteed place in paradise. The reward is not earthly, it is eternal. The crowd erupts. Men shout, Deus vult. God wills it. The cry spreads through the assembly like wildfire. Knights fall to their knees. Bishops weep. Urban has tapped into something primal, something that transcends the political calculation that birthed this moment. He has offered a desperate, violent, starving population a purpose, a mission, a chance to transform their suffering into something holy. But Urban is still thinking politically. He envisions a controlled military expedition, disciplined armies led by bishops and powerful nobles, marching under papal authority to demonstrate that the Pope, not emperors or kings, commands Christendom. He imagines himself as the architect of a new crusading order that will unite the fractured West under Roman authority. What he does not imagine is what actually happens. The message spreads faster than anyone anticipated. Preachers carry Urban's words beyond France, into Germany, into Italy, into regions the Pope never intended to recruit. And foremost among these preachers is a man named Peter the Hermit, a wandering ascetic with wild eyes and a gift for oratory that rivals Urban himself. Peter does not speak of careful military campaigns. He speaks of apocalypse, of the end times, of Christ himself returning to judge the living and the dead, and how those who march to Jerusalem will witness the second coming. His message resonates with the poor in ways Urban's calculated appeal to knights never could. Peasants sell everything they own for passage. Entire villages empty as families pack their belongings and join the march. They are not soldiers. They have no training, no armor, no understanding of what waits between Europe and Jerusalem. They know only that a holy man has promised them salvation and that anything is better than the life of starvation and violence they are leaving behind. Peter gathers an army. Tens of thousands, more. They call it the People's Crusade. And in the spring of 1096, months before Urban's carefully organized military expedition is ready to depart, Peter leads them east. Meanwhile, Europe's nobility is mobilizing, not as a unified force, but as separate armies under separate commanders. Godfrey of Bouillon gathers troops in the Rhineland. Raymond of Toulouse raises the largest contingent from southern France. Bohemond of Taranto, a Norman adventurer who has already fought against the Byzantines in Italy, sees an opportunity for conquest and glory. Robert of Normandy, son of William the Conqueror, takes the cross.
These are not altruistic men. They are ambitious, calculating, hungry for land and legacy. But they have committed themselves to a journey that will require everything they have. The preparations are staggering. Armies must be equipped, supply lines established, routes negotiated with every kingdom and principality between France and Constantinople. Tens of thousands of people are preparing to march 2,000 miles through hostile territory toward a city most of them will never see. The Pope has called, the Pope has promised, and now the machinery of the largest mass movement in European history is grinding into motion.
But Urban's carefully laid plans are already unraveling. Peter's People's Crusade reaches Constantinople months ahead of schedule. Alexios, expecting disciplined mercenaries, instead finds an uncontrollable mob. They pillage Byzantine territory. They clash with local populations. Alexios ships them across the Bosphorus as quickly as possible, hoping they will disperse. They do not. They march into Turkish territory. And there, the Seljuks annihilate them. Tens of thousands are slaughtered. Peter survives. Most of his followers do not. Their bones will line the roads to Jerusalem as a warning to those who follow. Yet the main armies are still coming. By late summer 1096, the various contingents are departing Western Europe. They move like a slow tide, consuming resources, overwhelming local authorities, leaving economic devastation in their wake. This is not an army in any traditional sense. It is a migration, a human flood driven by faith, desperation, and the promise that somewhere, at the end of 2,000 miles of suffering, lies redemption. Pope Urban II sits in Rome, finally having reclaimed the city from the anti-pope. He has achieved his political goal. The papacy's authority is restored. But the thing he set in motion has become something beyond his control, beyond anyone's control. 100,000 souls are marching toward the east, driven by forces that no single man can direct. Some seek salvation. Some seek glory. Some seek only escape from a dying world. But all of them believe that God Himself has commanded this journey. And on the distant walls of Jerusalem, defenders look north and wait, because the storm is coming, and nothing will ever be the same.